That would be very
You're left.
professional.
This is Senate Transportation, and we are resuming our testimony. We are talking about the miscellaneous DMV bill, and I think it's section 13. And we're talking about towing, and we're hoping that we have some sort of an agreement between all the players on this.
You want to go first? This is your language.
Sure. Matt Russo, Deputy Commissioner for DMV. So we have agreed on language, updated language, which ups the total for reimbursement and outlines that a vehicle being removed from a state right away by the Agency of Transportation solely will be reimbursed with proof of receipt.
And you have a change in language, and what does that do?
The updated language?
Yeah.
So we're making it so that the Agency of Transportation is the only one that can be reimbursed by DMV for removal of the vehicle from a public right of way. And they would just provide proof to us.
So Lucy Guerin, from MMR on behalf of Vermont Towing Association. We agree with the language. The one piece that the deputy commissioner didn't say was the 250 was also raised for freight tows.
Okay.
So, and we just want to thank DMV for all the work with us and working with us and continuing to work with us.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Go ahead.
So just to make sure I understand, we're raising the full cap to 250 for the amount of money.
Mhm.
We're no longer having municipalities be getting access to be reimbursed through this. I thought that was in part what the last language was supposed to do, was to allow in some way municipalities to be able to get some kind
Yeah,
of.
there was some confusion last week when we took this up, and after meeting with the commissioner, it's AOT and so there was confusion on our part, I believe, that we would municipalities or fire stations would have to reimburse us. That was not the intent of the language.
Yeah.
Of DMV.
Okay.
We are good.
Okay, thank you.
That's one of the pieces we had to clear up.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And based on this language, I mean, was this worked on with Damian Leonard with our legislative? Was it worked on with Damian, or is it's been reviewed and okay, yeah, then a very good compromise then.
Well, at least another section when we get going through this bill that we can go by and go yep to. I like the check marks.
Yeah.
I like them. Did you have a
I
question?
didn't really understand the third sentence. Commissioner of Motor Vehicle shall notify the Commissioner of Finance and Management who shall issue the payment to the towing service for vehicles removed from public property. That's removed by anybody. Time for any payment. Like it's not clear that what that sentence is, in my mind. Is that supposed to be the same, but not the same as the first two sentences clear? Like motor vehicle gets abandoned vehicle, they'll pay the up to $250. What's happening in that third sentence? What would be an example? Is that, you know what I mean? Because it just said for service vehicles removed from public property by AOT, but you know what I mean?
Right. Just a regular public tow.
This is for a public. So like so the local police call and get had it towed, or it's getting troopers have it towed, or the DMV tows it. It doesn't matter who tows it. Finance and management will pay.
Whereas they're who is issuing the check.
And it doesn't matter, and you're gonna send it to the towing. They're gonna send it, they're gonna pay the towing service for any vehicle removed from property. Does that mean the towing service needs to send it to they would send it to DMV, even
Right.
if they were asked to remove it by municipal police.
They would, yeah, if the towing company would fill out the form and be reimbursed.
That,
I think this is specific to abandoned vehicles, right? This doesn't impact us, so.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't be saying.
so this is all.
This is for abandoned vehicles.
So, what about a crash? Like if there's a crash, there's a vehicle on the shoulder, but you know, it would be better just to get it out of there. It's kind of close and they have it removed. With this,
I believe if it was a crash, I believe VSP would handle that.
would they get paid to do this way?
We are working with them
Okay.
on how that's gonna work out. This is separate from that.
Okay, so this is to help pay, kind of what your original intent was, but like you pay the other department that pays the tow, or
Right.
just covers those tows so that the tow will show up because they know they're gonna get paid.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah, Captain Nesto is working with VSPF right now on their situation.
Do you see a need to say that this issue of payment to the towing service for vehicles removed from public property by a public entity? I mean, I probably goes without saying that you wouldn't pay it if it wasn't requested to be removed by a state entity. It's just that
I'm not sure if
it seems very broad, just for vehicles removed from public property, could be a lot of things. And I'm also not sure what, I guess the finance and management would just kind of transfer the money between the budget.
The eyes in the back of my head, there's
For the record, I'm Damon Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. The towing from public property is covered in the cross-referenced sections there. So the sections 2151 to 2157 lay out a whole process for when a vehicle is abandoned on public property, how it goes through the process of being towed, notice, etc. And so this is just laying out for after the municipality. So if it's on private property, the private property owner would pay the towing costs.
Yeah.
If it's on public property, the public pays the towing costs, and this just provides a reimbursement program or a way to pay that through the state rather than leaving it on, say, a municipality or something like that.
And since those sections are,
Since those sections are cross-referenced,
well, in two sentences prior, that kind of carries through the third sentence.
that's how I would read this.
And it doesn't say abandoned vehicles. We could be removing any vehicle for any reason from public property, the way I.
Yeah, so to be clear, when I put this language into your next draft of the DMV bill, I can make that more clear.
Okay.
So yeah, this isn't the final version of the language that will go in the DMV bill. This is just the rough version that we have for this morning.
Okay.
But I will make that more clear. As I read it, it refers back to those sections, and it is intended to sort of just deal with what happens as far as paying the towing service when it's a public property tow. Under those sections of the abandoned motor vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah,
My support for the whole effort. I just want to make sure we're good.
yeah, I'll make it clear.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Get that done.
Silver pocket. I'm gonna just.
These sections down there. Yeah.
So I'm going to. And we've got a long ways to go with all of this, but, I have taken the liberty of, and I've had numerous conversations around the legislature, one with, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and, I have briefly talked about this in both appropriations and here. I'm gonna put a proposal on the table. And we're definitely gonna have the league in. I didn't want the league in before we put something on the table to bounce off from. The league, I know, has always had concerns that there's no revenue sharing. I would, take issue with that. I think we have had some sort of revenue sharing in the towns through the municipal programs that we offer and through the mileage that we send out. I will agree with them. We've done not the best job of funding that through the years. And some of that, I believe, is because it's never had, it's been a budgeted item, and within the agency of transportation, between maintenance and aid for towns, it's 100% state. It doesn't have a federal match. So in an agency where we are stuck chasing match a lot of times, those two areas I think get left out. And so given the fact that, in my mind, and given the fact that we've been in towns that are now trying to expand beyond the 1%, this is an attempt to try to have something consistent that would help all towns, that would do this in an organized way and not have 3.5 million going here and 500 there and yeah, and that. It does not do anything about the existing 1%. It's all about expansions that are happening in the local option taxes. And Damien has drafted something. This is all up for all of us to talk about change. And if it's something we're interested in, I know that there is interest in the House Committee. And I was, I'm going to ask the permission of the members of this committee, should, if it's something we want to explore more, do we want to do it with the House Transportation Committee? I know that as we started this year, we said that we wanted to reach out to other committees around the legislature. So this is an idea that I think there's some interest around the building about, and trying to get something that is consistent off the ground and would better fund existing formulas back to all towns. And if you would, Damien, start through, and this is all subject to this committee weighing in and change.
So for the record, again, I'm Damien Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I think you've all got the draft in front of you. Yep, that's the one. So the top section in here reads local option municipal services tax. So importantly, what this does is it doesn't create something separate from the current local option tax program. What it provides is that if you're a municipality that already assesses one or more of the local option taxes, then you can impose an additional 1% local option municipal services tax on those taxes, on one or more of those taxes. So, for example, if you have sales and the meals and rooms tax, you could choose just to put the additional percentage on sales, or you could put it on all of them. The additional tax would have to be recommended and approved to the municipality by the same process. So the legislative body recommends the tax and the municipality votes on it at a regular special meeting that's warned for that purpose. So this could be town meeting, or it could be a special vote. Or it could be regular election day, that sort of thing. The tax would be administered in the same manner as the local option tax. And importantly, taxes collected on the sale of aviation jet fuel would have to be treated the same as they are under the local option tax provisions. And as a reminder, I think everyone in this committee is familiar with the federal laws and regulations that require that sales tax on aviation fuel have to be redirected to aviation purposes. And so that gets siphoned off separately. Of the non-aviation portion of these taxes, 50% would go back to the municipality in which they were collected without any reduction for the costs of administration or collection. And then 40% would be deposited in a new special fund known as the Local Option Municipal Transportation Special Fund. And any remaining revenue would be deposited in the Pilot Special Fund. Revenues received by the municipality, just like regular local option taxes, would be expended for municipal services only and not for education expenditures. So what that prevents is a situation of funding inequality where a municipality that chooses to have a local option tax because they have a lot of tourism or something like that can have more money directed to education.
And that all just
Yeah.
tracks what is
Yeah,
in the language for the 1% now.
yeah, we mirrored that language for the existing local option taxes. This isn't a new proposal. The next section sets up the special fund. It would be established in the Agency of Transportation and managed as a standard special fund. The purpose would be to provide additional state aid for town highways pursuant to the provisions of Section 306, which includes most of our state aid for town highways grant programs, not all of them. And then, as you'll see below, we break this out into 3 specific programs in the initial proposal here. So the fund would consist of primarily the receipts from the local option municipal services tax. It could also include gifts, grants, or contributions that are made to the fund, and any amounts that are transferred to the fund by the General Assembly. And as you'll see later in the proposed language, there is one such transfer in the initial year to get the fund going. The interest earned on the balances, fund balances would be credited to the fund. The secretary would seek and accept gifts, donation, or could seek and accept gifts, donations, and grants from any source, public or private, to be dedicated for deposit into the fund. The Commissioner of Finance and Management would be directed to anticipate receipts to the fund and issue warrants based on the anticipated amounts. The reason we have that language is because these taxes are collected on a quarterly basis. And so you can anticipate incoming receipts, but they may not all land in the fund at the same time. So in order to allow the money to get out to municipalities, you can anticipate those receipts. And then monies in the fund would be used solely to provide state aid to municipalities pursuant to subsections 306 A, E, and H of this chapter, and that could be changed depending on the interests of the committee. And for any administrative costs incurred in administering the funds. It's also worth noting that with these restrictions, this is the default. As happens with many of these funds, we notwithstand to direct the money to something that we find to be more pressing in the current year. Or we might change, for example, in the next paragraph, we provide that the aggregate amount of money is appropriated for those town highway projects would not exceed 95% for a given fiscal year. You could, of course, change that and empty the fund out or spend the higher percentage depending on experience with the fund. The next section amends the various state aid for town highways programs. So the first is in 306A. If you go down to page 5 with me, I left a little more than a page of 306A in there for your information. But we're not making substantive changes there. And what we're providing in the new subdivision 4 is that in addition to the amounts appropriated, a portion of the anticipated annual revenue of the local option municipal transportation special fund would be appropriated for class 1, 2, and 3 town highways in an amount that's consistent with the provisions of subdivision C4, which breaks out how that money is split up for class 1, 2, and 3 town highways. Essentially, we've set a percentage for each of those highway types, and then municipalities receive an apportioned amount based on their portion of said class 3 roads in the state. So this would be apportioned in the same manner, but it would be in addition to the amounts that are currently appropriated in statute, which are subject to an annual inflator that you added a couple of years ago. And this would not decrease the amount appropriated pursuant to subdivision 1 or be subject to the annual inflationary adjustment. So in other words, this amount will fluctuate with the revenues to the fund, and it will not affect that base amount that you get every year from the annual appropriation. For the state aid for town highway structures, there's a minor technical change at the bottom of page 5. But the main changes again start a little further down on page 6, and it's the same structure as we used before. So in addition to the amounts appropriated for town highway structures, and then this would be in addition to and appropriated in the same manner and would not affect the inflator or be subject to that inflationary adjustment. And then in subsection H, beginning on page 7, we do the same thing for the class 2 town highway roadway program. Again, the funds here would not impact the amounts that are appropriated, and they would not affect the inflator or be subject to the inflationary adjustment.
I would just say it would be my hope that going forward, we haven't really revisited class 2 roadway or structures, and the grants are around $500,000. And for a lot of towns, when they get to a big project, $500,000 is a drop in the bucket to be able to help them do a significant change. So it would be my hope that this committee in the future, if we've got some money to work with, would begin to look at that and say, can we increase the amount? It's a catastrophe, I think, in a lot of communities when they have a major culvert and a major stretch of road that needs redoing, and so it would be the hope in the future if we had some money, we could pay attention here and be helpful.
And then the final section here, I mentioned this earlier, is the sort of initial seed money for this program. And this would appropriate $3 million from the pilot special funds to the Agency of Transportation to provide additional grants on the general state aid to town highways program, which is the class 1, 2, and 3 roadway program. Again, that could be adjusted to include all of the above, or to include more targeted aid or a different amount. One thing I would note is that, and would defer to the folks who understand the financial operations a little better than I do, because we may also need, if you go forward with this language, we may need an adjustment to the T-bill
Yep.
To reflect this in the transportation program. And presumably we'll need some adjustments in the budget.
I'm thinking that I will tell the town aid program is about 30 million. The 3 million is to kick this off because it will be time before other towns join in and we have money going in it. That it would be good to if you're kicking this off, increase the town highway by 10% in a single year to start this. But that's all up for discussion and we can, and you know, the committee may have other ideas, but that was the thinking in kicking this off. And I think what we've heard is the pilot fund has a surplus, and this is general aid to everybody.
I don't know if you can answer this at this point, but how long at 10%, how long does that 3 million? How far down the line does that?
Well, I think we're gonna have to talk about all of that. I just threw an idea out there for us as a committee to have a discussion and, you know, try to move in a direction. I think there's a sincere. I think all of us around the table have expressed concern about our towns and that we want to help them. And this is meant to try to create a discussion in here about what's a thoughtful way to do that. And not leave people behind.
I mean, generally, I like to think about things before
Mhm.
saying things, but this sounds like a really good idea.
Well, we're gonna spend.
So I thank you for bringing this to us, and the municipality has an incentive with 50%, but then everyone else gets a share. And we're using an existing formula, right? It's not a new formula, which is really helpful, because we already know how to do it. I think that's good. It's not overly complicated, so I think we can explain it to people. I see a lot of benefits. Thank you.
Well, I think
But
there's gonna be a lot to talk about.
So the main thing is that this 50% of the town, that's 75, because
Yep.
that 1%.
Yep.
And then,
And the state share would go from 25 to 10 in the second piece, knowing that in the existing 1%, we already have a surplus. So this,
and when it says a portion shall go to town highway structure, and a portion shall go to the,
I think,
how do we decide which portion?
I think that would go through the budget process.
Okay.
So it's not set in stone.
And did you explain why there's two do you have it twice? Like on page, what am I missing here? Page 6, there's a 5 and 6A that look similar to.
Yeah. Yep. The language tracks, from subsection to subsection. The way that section works, each subsection has a different grant program in it. So I think we go down through, there's like 10 programs or something in 306. And so the language, this happened last year with the inflationary adjustment language that we added. It largely tracks what was in the pre-existing inflationary adjustment for state aid for town highways. We added language like that to these two sections actually, or two subsections. And so again, we're adding language that is a bit repetitive at some point in the future if the programs were consolidated a little bit into sort of larger grants, but fewer streams of funding. You could potentially consolidate this language down, but right now we're we've taken what might be 10 sections of law and packed them into one section, so you get a lot of repetitive language.
I would just say to you that some flexibility to move that. I have a real concern about. I've got a bunch of towns that have roads that are really feeder roads off from the state highway system, and they get pounded. And 350 or 500,000 with these grants have been, and only being able to get them once every 3 years. Towns are undergone. And how can we do something that's meaningful? And I look at Montpelier and say Town Hill Road going
Oh my
from
God.
Route 2 down into the center of town is really, it has significant importance that is well beyond the local community. And should we be re-looking at structures in class 2 and figuring out how to redo this formula to help people? But you can't redo it if you got no money. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you, David, so much. I think this language is really well drafted. And I think it's extremely readable, which is one of the things that is hardest, I think, for your job. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
I think I
To
find
be fair,
that,
it was a team effort.
oh, good.
Chris, Logan, and Kirby all contributed, so this is all 4 of us were working on this language together. That might be why it's so good.
Well, yeah, because I feel like we've heard kind of bits of this idea, so it's really nice to have it spelled out, and I think I fully understand the argument you're making for this change. So I guess I have a couple of thoughts and then questions. My first thought is, this isn't gonna fix the problem that we have before us. This is a small drop in a very large bucket that is having a sieve run out of it. So I'm a little concerned about spending an inordinate amount of time for such a small amount of money and not reviewing the larger funding studies that we've gotten from AOT. I feel like we've spent a lot of time on this specific topic, which is a very small amount of money that may or may not happen if a town passes an additional 1%. This is also hypothetical money, because we're still betting that the towns themselves will say, oh, it's still worth it, even though I'm only getting 50% and 40% is going somewhere else to everybody. And then, so I think it changes the calculus for towns. So we may not even get any of this money. So I want to understand what happens with this language if no town pursues this secondary 2%. What happens with like the money that would come from the pilot fund towards town highway aid that's listed in the bill? Because there is just a fixed amount transfer. So I want to know what happens there. And then I also want to understand from the league's perspective, if this is the right way to frame it up within town highway aid, because I know, well, I appreciate the idea of us using an existing fund. There are a lot of structural inequalities built into the town highway aid formula fund. Like, that's just your experience with your town having the feeder roads getting less money than maybe they're worth. Well, are they class 1 roads? Are they class 2 roads? Like, all of those, they're probably class 1, but there's lots of questions about the allocation within that I don't know if we want to perpetuate some of those problems. So that's a thought. And then my last thought is, where does this go? Like, is this the T-bill? Is this isn't DMV miscellaneous? So are you thinking you want to pass this as a separate bill? Or are you thinking we're going to wait for the T-bill? Or was your conversation about the House coming over to potentially entice them to put it in? Like, I guess what's the
I think
the
House
field
had
play?
some, well, let me back up to the broader discussion. We're going to pay their, and I said this, I think before, I think there are really 3 areas for me as we look at transportation as a whole. We have a short-term problem. I think we were really clear. We're going to be faced with the proposal that came from the administration for purchasing use. And I don't know whether that will be successful in getting through or not, but there's a short-term problem. And I think what we heard from Logan, particularly yesterday, was if the purchase and use was successful.
We still,
We run out of money in 6 years.
yeah, exactly.
And, but that's would be a short-term fix.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, even in the House, what I've heard is that they might be more interested in dumping in general fund surplus for that. But that's a short-term fix. The longer-term fix that we have been, I think, part of listening to other states. We've been talking about MBUF and vehicle miles traveled. I think we're going to, in this committee, hopefully, and I haven't heard objections to this around the table, look at how do we set the stage to move towards vehicle mile travel with a long term?
Oh,
Would be
Oh, no, I totally hear you on that. The issue is even with all of the projections we've seen from AOT on that, it's not gonna actually, it's not gonna actually affect our long-term problem either. It's not going to, you're only, MBUF as it's designed, even over the next like 10 years, is only for electric vehicles. We don't have enough electric vehicles to actually meet
I
our
would say to you,
deficit.
I think,
So I guess my point that I'm trying to make is that I guess I appreciate this, but I really hope that we can spend actually dealing with those monstrous problems as well. And I hope this isn't like the thing that's gonna, you know, I don't want to do this and then not actually fix those other two massive problems. So I think that's where I'm
what
coming from.
we're,
But I love this idea. I think I'm very in favor of
I
moving
think
forward.
where we're headed in the T-bill is, I think we're going to have to look at, can we move beyond just electric vehicles? What would it take to move to hybrid? What would it take? When we reach a certain point where fuel taxes with combustion engines, the lines start to drop.
Yeah, 2030.
Do we have everything in place to be able to move into a place where vehicle mile travel can really pick up the pace to do that? And I think unless we start talking about that now, it's at least a 3-year process to do
Yeah.
that.
And I guess what I'm saying is we can be doing that and it still won't solve the problem, even if we move at lightning speed with MBUF. All of the states that we reviewed, they haven't even they barely made out of the black after what, 7 or 8 years of full. So I do think it's a little bit of it's not actually going to be the solution for the next decade to meet our needs. So I think we do have to also address that this time. So I'm supportive of, I guess that's my point. I'm supportive of this idea, but I do hope we can not just do this, but also other stuff.
So I think there's a short-term problem, there's the longer-term problem, and then internally within our budget, there are 2 areas that get shorted every time because there's no federal match. One is maintenance and the other is municipal. And I think the shortest end of the stick within the transportation area is the municipalities.
Yes.
And the idea of setting up a fund to be able to supplement stuff that is directly focused with a revenue source opens the door for us to, in a more consistent way, hopefully putting a bigger spotlight on municipal. So it's really, as we go through the T-bill in the second half of this session, will be to focus in those areas. So and I agree with you, the long-term solution, we're gonna have to take bites at this. But
I guess this just isn't as big of a bite as I think we need to take. So I'm hoping this is step 1 And I know that there's, I think you've referenced a few times the house's perspective on this. I've had conversations with about 5 different house transportation members. I don't know what the quorum is over there, but they're seemingly interested in a gas tax, local option tax, where they get to put it on top rather than this proposal. So I'm wondering if we could maybe have that kind of conversation between,
I would
The two
like our
sides.
committee to meet with, that committee when we're comfortable with, yeah, not in the little basics of this, but in the overall scheme, is this something that we would like to move ahead and work with them?
can I just ask my question, because I did have specific questions that didn't get addressed, which is, so what happens with that last section with the appropriation with the 3 million, this is not contingent on if Stowe or another town actually moves forward with a secondary 1%.
It's a one-time appropriation for the coming fiscal year.
So so it's almost like that could be standalone from the
Yeah.
rest of it, yeah.
Yep.
So I think that that's my one other piece is I would like to hear the league's perspective on the 3 million transfer specifically, because they made cases to us last year in Senate Gov Ops on ways to use that funding that would help municipalities. And I see the transportation angle, but they also have basic costs other than transportation that are just falling through the cracks right now. And so I do like the idea of giving them independence to use that money how they best see fit. And a lot of communities are deciding to proactively drop roads, for example. So it might not be that they need that money for transportation. It might be they need it for other investments. So I do want us to debate a little bit, like, if we are going to take $3 million out of the pilot funds, what were the towns actually asking for last year from the pilot funds that we denied? That we didn't give them the full amount that they asked for. So I'd love to kind of weigh those together if we can, because I think we should hear from the municipalities on what they actually want versus assuming that this might be the thing that they would put it towards. Because I don't know, like, Hartford has a different perspective than Weathersfield on this issue, you know? I'd like to hear from the league on, especially. But I just want to underscore, I'm really appreciative that you brought this language forward, because I think it gets us on the right track to have a conversation. And I hope it's just like step 1.5 towards.
I think, yeah, we have a long ways to go.
Yeah.
And, I think we're almost, yeah, there are other comments.
Just one comment to, I understand what you're saying, and this isn't, I don't think, intended to fix all the problems. But I prefer multi-sources, you know, I don't want to just hang our hat on one source of revenue. So I think the better we can identify logical sources of revenue, and they can work together, and at some point, I'm sure we'll get an analysis of what are the potentials of those, hopefully. I mean, we have to get a potential of those revenues, but I think it's just better in the long run to have multiple sources of revenues, because we don't know what's gonna happen in the future.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I agree with that. And I also, I mean, I think we're thinking outside the box of this proposal. We haven't done that. In my experience here in transportation forever, we rely on the 3 common sources of revenue that we've been looking at for years, and almost every one of them is definitely declining. The other 2 are kind of like stagnant. So I'm supportive of this. Even going forward, it's not going to raise a lot of money, you know, in the next couple of years. But if this idea of people tacking on a 1% local option tax of 1% on top of the 1% catches on, and Stowe passes it, and Brattleboro chimes in, and all of a sudden people are saying, hey, this is a bad idea. We could be in for a pretty good windfall if it takes off. If it doesn't, we're no worse off than we are today. So I like the idea.
It takes off, in that I don't want it nickel and dime the pilot money and all of this. This would direct it directly to the town.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but you know, we're gonna have all of this and we're gonna have testimony from Tucker tomorrow and and, I think we need to have the tax department in after you've had a chance to talk to some people we'd like to have the league and, I may, get one of my towns, and if you have any other, Morristown is specifically looking at a local option tax to fund, they went out and spent $30,000 or $40,000 to have an assessment of all of their roads. They have a specific plan over 5 years to spend $800,000 a year. They're gonna raise 1.2 from the local option tax, and they're gonna dedicate 800,000 of it for the next 5 years. I am thinking about getting them in the chair because it's all of the pieces that we're talking about here. So, I see the towns as one piece in an overall picture that we have to tackle, and it's not going to be easy. I don't expect the conversation in here around whether or not we may match this year, whether it comes from purchase and use or it comes from surplus. I don't expect that to be an easy discussion. And I personally would think vehicle miles traveled. I would put something in place to put us on a track to include all vehicles.
Yeah.
And but if we don't start talking about that now, systems in state government don't move. Go ahead.
And I would just add on, and I don't know kind of what our time is. I know we have Damien still here, but the only other concern I have with this language is I think it would make it less likely for a town to be interested in moving forward with a secondary percent. So I do want to understand, like, are we also, I would love to have Stowe come in. I'd love to have someone from their community weigh in because it is a big effort. And I had some slight disagreement with comments that were made before about who's actually paying a local option tax. And it is the taxpayers, it is us as individuals, but municipalities who put forward a 1% tax usually spend years building political will on their board, in the community, among small business owners. It took Hartford multiple attempts to get it on the ballot, and it took us a ton of will. And then to see that money not necessarily fully being supported, being used to fully support the towns, that irks me just inadvertently already. So to then not see them get the same amount of money, I have some qualms with that. So I do want to understand the perspective of communities who are moving forward with the local option tax. And then the last thing I will say is we are in control of the budget for the T-bill. We are in control, not the Agency of Transportation. We can say, in addition to this, that we want more money to go to Town Highway 8. We want more money to go towards these projects. We don't have to give into this paradigm that they've created where the towns just get less and less. I understand the federal match to it, but we're so far beyond that because we're in a $32 million deficit to get the match. So I do think we need to have a conversation about within the T-bill, not just this strategy, but how do we divert money towards Town Highway 8 as much as we can, because our municipalities are going to be experiencing extreme difficulty and are already making difficult choices. So I think we can empower ourselves to look at the T-bill when it comes our way to divert money in a better way as well. It's not just new revenue, it's what is the slice of the pie that they're getting. I think we have a half an hour.
At least you got something to sleep on. All right. I think at this point, I'm going to ask you to take us offline, Megan.